Today I want to look at the most basic question of all, and that is to ask and to answer, what is the purpose of life? Now, it's the most basic question of all, because we've got to know, what are we doing here? What was this world created for? But somehow we don't actually ask the question often enough, because you really, to keep up with life and to survive and to just achieve everything that we want to achieve takes full concentration, full effort, and it always feels like the big question about what is the purpose of life, that can wait for another day. And sometimes it just gets lost in it all, but it's the most important question, because also it'll provide the most powerful motivation for everything that we need to do. As we know, the deepest human psychological need, according to Viktor Frankl, which is now very widely accepted theory, and that is the human being's search for meaning. And you can't find meaning without purpose. So we have to start with, what is the purpose of life? Once we get that, then we can see the meaning of it. But even the question itself presupposes that the world actually does have a purpose. Like if we say, what is the purpose of life? It starts with the fact that actually life does have a purpose. And then we say, well, what is the purpose of life? And as human beings, instinctively we believe life does have a purpose, but actually this week's Parsha establishes it, because it establishes the fact that God created the universe. The very opening verse of the entire Torah is Bereishit, bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. But actually, if a person believes in the theory of random evolution that says there's no creator, well then actually, if this universe and human life is the product of an accident, a mistake, because that's what random evolution actually says at its core, then it means life has no purpose. We can't even ask the question, what is the purpose of life? Because to ask the question, what is the purpose of life, presupposes that life has a purpose. But we know instinctively, on the most deepest human, putting aside all intellectualizations and everything else, we know on the most deepest instinctive level as a human being, life does have a purpose. We know it's not a random accident. Now the question is, what is that purpose? The place that I want to have a look at this is from the very first Mishna in chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot, that says if we want to discover the purpose of life and the purpose of the universe and why God created the universe, because now if we're going to ask what's the purpose of life, we have to ask what's the purpose of the universe. And if we want to answer what's the purpose of the universe, we have to say, well, what was God's purpose in making it? The Mishna in Pirkei Avot, which gives us the oral tradition handed down from God himself at Sinai all the way to our times, gives us the clue, and it says if you want to know the purpose of the universe and why God created everything, the way to look at it is to look in this week's Parsha, not simply at the fact that God created the universe, but how he did it. And the Mishna says, Ba'asara ma'amarot nivra ha'olam. The world was created with 10 statements. What was the methodology that because God could have brought the world into existence, the whole universe into existence, in any way. He could have willed it into existence. In fact, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says that's what it means, statements. These are acts and statements of God's will to bring it into existence. But when you look carefully in the Parsha, you will see that there are clear verbal statements attributed to Hashem. Like, for example, Vayehi Or, let there be light. For example, Yekavu Hamayim, let all the waters gather to form the oceans. Let the living things come into the waters to form the fish and the birds and the animals. So these are all 10 statements, and if you add them up carefully, you will find 10 statements that God created the world with, and that methodology that he chose to spread it across 10 statements, instead of making it one statement. The Mishna says, V'alo b'mamar echad yachol hibaros. God could have created the world with one statement. He could have just done that, and everything would have happened immediately. In fact, he did it across 10 statements, and it took 6 days. And it was spread out over 6 days and 10 statements, which indicates what? And that's what it says. Ma Talmud Lomar. And the way the Meforshim explain it, what was God teaching us when he chose this method? Because he could have chosen any method. What was really going on? And when we work out that, then we're able to begin to work out the purpose of creation. And once we know the purpose of creation, we then know the purpose of our lives within it. let's look at that idea that God created the world with these 10 statements. The Abarvanel and the Rambam and others learn what this means is, what it indicates to us is that God put effort into the creation of the world. When we say effort, let's put it in inverted commas, because God, when He operates, it's effortless. It's not like as a human being that everything that we do and that we achieve and that we create and that we make requires real intentional effort. Hashem is above all of that. But what He did by doing that was show us that He cares about what He made. And therefore, by doing it with the 10 statements and doing it Himself personally, like the Abarvanel gives the following analogy. If you want to build a house, you could just say to the architect and the builder, listen, go build me a house. Do whatever you want. Just put it up. I don't care. And tell me when it's done. Or you could say to them, this is what I want. I want this number of bedrooms. This is what I want for the garden. And you give the detailed instructions, and then you follow up to make sure that it's done in exactly the way that you did. God could have just said, in the beginning, He created everything, and then it was there. But by going through the 10 statements spread over the 6 days, actually what He was doing was saying He cares about the outcome of it. Means He took personal trouble. It was intentional. It was planned. It was not flippant. It was not trivial. And that indicates that the final product is something that He truly wanted, and therefore wanted for a particular purpose. So what the Mishna is emphasizing is that the creation by God is something which indicates that He did it with a purpose. Because we started off by saying, look, if it's just a random accident, well, then it's without purpose. But the Mishnah is coming to say, even by God making these statements, He's showing purpose. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. You see, Albert Einstein believed in the fact, he affirmed the fact that this world had to have a creator. Like he said, and this is a quote from the biography by Walter Isaacson, who wrote about Albert Einstein's life. I wrote about this a while ago, but he says, this is the quote, "I'm not an atheist. The problem is too vast for our limited minds. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows that someone must have written those books. It does not know how. It does not understand the languages in which they are written. The child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That seems to me is the attitude of even the most intelligent human being towards God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only dimly understand these laws." Einstein understood this all had to have a creator. It could not have been a random accident. But then he actually said he doesn't believe in a personal God. This is what Einstein said and quoted by Isaacson in his book. "I cannot conceive of a personal God who would directly influence the actions of individuals or who would sit in judgment on creatures of His own creation." He didn't believe in the concept of prayer. He didn't believe in the concept of free will. He just said, well, God created the world, but then has no interest in the world. And what our Mishna is saying, and this is the way the Rambam and the Abarvanel and many of the other commentators explain, the fact that God took the trouble to create the world, and when I say trouble, it's in inverted commas, through 10 statements, means He really cares about it. And this is where Einstein went wrong. You see, he made a philosophical error. Einstein was a scientist. He was not a philosopher. And he made the following philosophical error. He acknowledged, and it's in full credit to him, he acknowledged that in terms of modern science, as it was in those days, and today there's even much more evidence for it, he had to accept the idea of a creator. But then he said, maybe this creator created it but doesn't care about what he created. But that makes no sense, because you have an intelligent being who intelligently designs and creates something, and then you say to them, well, why did you do it? Let's go back to the analogy of the house that the Abarvanel uses in this Mishnah. Someone builds a house, and then you say to them, why did you build the house? And he said, well, I had no purpose, nothing, no reason. I just built it. But did you build it for, maybe you don't want to live in it, but you made it for an investment? No, I don't care. I just built it because I built it. That defies any kind of logic. What sort of an intelligent being would do something without any purpose behind it? But then it's even more than that. God created human beings. Then you say, and according to Einstein, He doesn't care about how we live and what happens to us. That would be like a parent giving birth to a child, and then you say, and then the parent says, I don't care whether the child lives or dies, succeeds or fails, struggles or has a good life. That's That's moving into the bizarre of almost a mentally disturbed person. So how can it be that God created this world? He created human beings who feel, who can suffer, who can have pleasure, all of these emotions, and He created us with that. And then we say, well, He doesn't care about what happens to us in the end. That is inconceivable from a logical point of view. Einstein, I think, made that mistake because in the era in which he lived in Western Europe in those times, to be a believer in God was out of vogue. It was not acceptable in the society in which he lived. Sigmund Freud, Bertrand Russell, all of atheism was the vogue of the day. So he couldn't go all the way in terms of belief. He was forced into what he did concede, which is that God created the world, but then couldn't take it further. What our Mishna is saying is, Ba'asara ma'amaros nivra ha'olam, the world was created with 10 statements because Hashem really cares about what He created. And once He really cares about it, that means what He created, He did with purpose and intent and really wanted it to happen. And because He did it with purpose and intent and really wanted it to happen, then we've got to ask ourselves, well, what was indeed His purpose? Now, the Maharal says the key here is the number 10. And he does an analysis of the number 10. Says the Maharal like this. Maharal says that the number 10 is a very interesting number because there are essentially, in the world of maths, there are 9 digits. There are 9 unique numbers. Okay, you can have the debate about whether 0 is a number, but putting that aside, there are 9 unique numbers. Number 10 is not a unique number. It takes the other 9 and unifies them and turns them into a unit. And then after that, 11 is just 10 plus 1, 12. Everything works within the concept of units of 10. And that was actually encoded into the creation. That's why all systems of maths work in units of 10, which is an amazing thing. If you think these are the 10 statements with which God created the world, it means 10 was encoded into the DNA of the world. So the Maharal says the number 10 is taking disparate elements and unifying it as one to make an integrated whole, which indicates an order and a coherence within it. And so by putting the number 10 into the DNA of creation, what God was really doing was saying, this is not haphazard, this is not random, this was not an accident. Actually, I have a plan and I have an intention behind it. The Maharal further says the number 10, as we know from the laws of Minyan, actually represents something which is holy and sacred. It's not just that it is an order, it has an order which indicates something which is special and which has a tremendous amount of holiness behind it. Now, what emerges from the Mishna, because the Mishna then goes on to say, God created the world with 10 statements. Why? In order to give reward to the righteous and to hold the wicked accountable. Which means that this entire world as we see it is human-centric. Okay, that's the next principle we learn from the Mishna. In other words, when we are looking to decipher God's intention in creating the universe, the most important principle, starting principle, is that everything He did was human-centric. Now, that's not obvious from just a cursory glance at the physical reality. I did a very quick search on ChatGPT and found out this. As we know, there are around 8 billion human beings, but when you're looking at animals, okay, there are 1.5 million species of animals and recorded species, and they estimate more than 8 million because they haven't actually identified all of them. There are more than 10,000 species of birds, 34,000 species of fish, 3 trillion trees in the world, plus close to 400,000 species of plants. When you put all of that together, the 8 billion human beings is nothing in all of this. So when you're looking at planet Earth, there's oceans which are filled with trillions of fish. There are forests and trees and animals, and the human being is just one species of all of that. And there are secular philosophies that look at the human race and say, well, we're just one of the elements of nature. And we're actually the worst element of nature because we cause the most havoc. And they see us as part of the world of nature, which you must do. If you just say the human being is the product of a random accident of evolution, well, then we're just a developed animal. We are part of the world of nature. And yet, at the heart Jewish philosophy, which is encapsulated in this Mishnah, is that all of creation and the physical universe that we see is human-centric, which means the purpose of all of these trillions of fish and trees and animals and all of this is for the human being. God created all of this for the human being, which is why, and this is what the Avot Rabbi Natan on this Mishnah actually says. It draws out from this Mishnah the preciousness of human life, linking to the Mishnah in Sanhedrin that says the human being was created alone because all of the rest of the animal and plant kingdom was created en masse. The human being was created alone to say, whoever saves one life saves the world, whoever destroys one life destroys the world, which the Maharal says means this, that it means that when you look at all of this, God created the whole world for the original two human beings, Adam and Eve, who were originally created, according to our sages, as one being. So he created this entire universe for the sake of one being, that original Adam and Eve, who entered into the world, and that would have been enough. And that's why the Breitzer in Sanhedrin says that man was created last, because everything had to be ready for the human being, for Adam and Eve to enter. It was all there waiting for the human being. The whole purpose of every element of creation is human-centric. And you can actually see it when you look at the world, and that's what it says in our Parsha. God says to Adam and Eve, he says, be fruitful and multiply, conquer the land, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky. This is your world. Of course, God said we have to treat this world with responsibility, with respect, not to destroy the environment, but it still means the human being is at the center of the universe and the very purpose for the creation. And you can see it because human civilization dominates the world. Human civilization dominates the world. It's not the animals, it's not the fish, it's not the birds, it's human beings that have achieved all of these awesome things, much of which is for the good, some which is destructive, but you cannot deny the domination of the human species, of humanity, which was originally part of God's original plan. And so therefore, when we are looking to frame the purpose of existence, what this Mishnah is telling us is God created the world with purpose. He had intent. He wants it to succeed. And at the center of it is the human being. And it's not only human-centric, it is morally and spiritually centric, meaning, look what the Mishnah says, God created all of this so that the righteous could be rewarded for sustaining the purpose of creation, and the wicked would be held accountable for not. Meaning, what is the purpose of creation? So that a person should be good and righteous, like what the Mishnah says, liten sachar tov letzadikim, to give reward to the righteous. Now, what does that mean? The Rambam says an amazing thing. It's because if you see the defining phraseology in the Mishnah, it says the righteous sustain the world and the wicked destroy the world. What world do they sustain or destroy? Says the Rambam, the world of one person. Every human being can make and build and create their own personal world or destroy their own personal world. How do you do that? Through the deeds that you do. So the Rambam says it is through how one has a connection and understanding of the truth, how one develops character, how one fulfills Hashem's mitzvahs, the commandments that God gives us, the commandments which He gave all of humanity, the 7 Noahide laws, and the mitzvahs that God gave the Jewish people. These mitzvahs, these commandments, are indeed what holds and allows the human being to fulfill their purpose, and that is actually the purpose of it all. So it's not just that creation is human-centric, it is that it is morally centric, which is also links to the other part of the Brisa in Sanhedrin, where it says that the human being was created last on the Friday so that it would enter into a world that was ready-made, and another opinion says so that they would go straight into a mitzvah. What was the very first mitzvah? Shabbos. They would go, as they were created, they went into a Shabbos, that there would be a place for the human being to connect with God and to do something which would be about building themselves and creating a better world. And so when it says in the Mishnah that with 10 statements God created the world, what does this teach us? It teaches us that He created everything with purpose, and that purpose was ultimately to do good, to serve Him, to do mitzvahs, to build our own personal world. And then Rav Avadim Bar Tanura adds on to that, because that's what the way that the Rambam learns it. He said it's also to build the whole world. because when a person does good, they bring merit not only to themselves, but the entire world, and make the world worthy of existence. Because if this is the purpose of the creation of the universe, then if there are enough people who are fulfilling the purpose, then the universe justifies itself in the eyes of Hashem, and then we are truly making it great. And so the point that Avot does, that Pirkei Avot does, is that it takes this philosophical concept of the creation of the world and then says, let's make it real for ourselves. What does this mean for us? It means that life has purpose. What is that purpose? To do good as God defines it, which is to build our character, to connect to the truth, to do good deeds, to follow the commandments of Hashem. That is why He created all of this. Once we understand that, then we can live with purpose. Our lives are animated by that sense of direction, and that everything we do then is uplifted by it. And the philosophical question of what is the purpose of life actually becomes the guiding question that transforms every moment of every day.